This is my story on how I went from a raging, free the nipple feminist to a Christian traditional housewife and mother. But before we jump into my story, I'm your host, Jasmine Dennis. Welcome back to Isn't It Obvious? If you haven't subscribed already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you guys know every single time I bring out new content. I grew up in a very traditional household. My mother, she never worked. She looked after all of the children, did all of the housework, did all of the dishes, cleaned up after everyone, took care of her 7 children, and also homeschooled a lot of us for our high school years. My dad was a breadwinner. He still is a very, very hard worker. He owns his own business. He's owned his own business for like 35 years, I think it is. He is the sole provider for our family. So I grew up in a very traditional household. I learned how to cook, clean, and look after a family from a very young age. And traditional roles have always worked for my parents. They have always been happy, organized, and they're both super happy with their roles in the family and in the marriage. But when I left school, I thought that the only option for me was to get a job, work, and make money, because that's all society was telling me at the time. That's all that was in movies. That's all that was on social media. But there was no push or encouragement to find a husband, to start a family, or get married or have children. The only thing I knew at the time was the ideology that women have been oppressed for thousands of years, that the patriarchy is oppressive, and women need to get a job and compete with men in the workforce. And I didn't even know that that's what I believed. I didn't even know that that was an ideology that was being pushed onto me, but that is exactly what I tried to do. So I started up, I didn't even know how many businesses. I was very entrepreneurial and still am, and I constantly was working myself to the ground. I was tired all the time. I was always burnt out. I also had no idea why any of my relationships weren't working out. I was in and out of relationships all the time, sleeping around, and I thought that was liberating to do what men do. And I was a self-proclaimed Christian, but I was very immoral. I was partying, I was sleeping around, I was a working woman and a raging feminist because of what society made me believe. But I ended up finding a great guy who would put up with my crap. But because I was still stuck in my old ways, I ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock. But luckily, everyone was super supportive of the pregnancy, and we ended up getting married when I was 7 months pregnant. But even when we had our daughter, I still had the mentality that I had to work, even if it was from home. So I started up a business back in 2020, which was going very, very well at the time, until I realized how much effort it is to actually run a business, to have a newborn baby, and look after a household while my husband's at work. But I was constantly tired and I had absolutely no time for my family. Family became a burden to me because all my focus was on this business, because I believed that I had to work, that I had to be so-called successful, or what society deems as successful. But my marriage almost broke down at the start of 2022. I know I'm being very real and raw here. And that was in the midst of probably the most successful time that my business had at that point. But I had absolutely no idea how to make a marriage work, and I was constantly in competition with my husband to be the masculine role in the household. I thought either my way or the highway. I was just like a working woman. I was constantly trying to build my business and be successful, and not really allowing him any time to work on his business or to better himself or to be the leader in our household, because I thought that was my job. Also note, at this point, I thought that shaving was oppressive. I thought I didn't have to look nice for my husband, that I could wear whatever I want, that sexual liberation was empowering, and so much more. I was woke. I was so woke, to say the least. But burnout was constantly happening. I was always changing my mind with what I wanted to do, because I just got so tired of the things that I was doing, and I felt like I had to change something because I was always tired and always burnt out, and always frustrated that things weren't working out the way that I wanted them to work out. So I was always taking breaks from my business. And I wasn't showing my husband or my daughter that they were a priority. And it was tough for my husband to be the man of the house because I was constantly competing for that role. But we ended up going through some marriage counseling and that helped a bit. But we ended up moving out of out of the house that we were in at the time and back to my parents' house because we decided to buy a bus and build like a mini home on wheels, which is almost finished. It's taken so much longer than we expected, but also at that time, the market was crazy. Every person that I knew that was renting at that time had to move out because they were selling the house because house prices were increasing. So we had to move out anyways. But I ended up having to sell my business because of the bus. I didn't realize how much time and effort it would take to actually build a home from scratch and look after a household, look after a child, clean, cook. I couldn't do it all like everyone told me that I could. And it was frustrating because I was seeing these women on social media who have these very successful businesses that are also moms and, clean and cook and do all that stuff. And I just couldn't do it. It was frustrating and I was constantly burnt out. Buying this bus and moving out of our old house was probably the best thing that could have happened to me because I had to close down my business because everything was just too much. I couldn't handle it. But when I closed down my business, I actually had time for my family. I actually had time to make nice meals. I had time to spend time with my husband. I had time to play with my daughter. I had time to organize and plan and look nice. And these things were actually a blessing rather than a burden like they were before. But from having more time on my hands, I started to do some research on marriage and how to be a good mother and how to serve my family in the best and most biblical way possible. But there was a verse that kept coming to my mind, and that was Ephesians 5:22-23, and it says, "For wives, this means submit to your husband as to the Lord, for the husband is head of the wife as Christ is head of the church." And learning to submit to my husband was a scary thing because I was always told that submission is oppressive and this ideology that we should submit to our husbands is slavery of some kind, that if I submit to my husband that I would have no free will. But that was not the case, and I actually had to unlearn, not learn, but unlearn everything that society had told me and actually learn a new way of doing marriage. And I learned that submitting to your husband is just simply trusting his judgment and trusting his decisions. And why would you be with someone if you don't trust their judgment and don't trust their decisions? It was handing over the responsibility that was actually wearing me down, handing that to my husband and letting him lead our family physically and spiritually. And letting your husband be the head of the household, it doesn't mean that you both aren't equal or that he's worth more than you. It's just simply understanding that you both have different roles, but they're just as important. In learning how men and women are so incredibly different and things that women actually thrive off completely changed my mind on feminism, my perspective on marriage and motherhood. I started to understand that being a modern working woman who believes that the patriarchy is oppressive and that women should be dominant and believing in toxic masculinity, it really creates women to be living in this victimized mindset and not actually taking any responsibility for your lives and in constant competition with men, which in the end actually made me angry, lonely, and miserable, and actually made me resentful to my husband. And being more traditional actually showed me that this is how women thrive. We're made to nurture, we're made to care, we're made to multitask around the household, to have and take care of children, to cook nice meals for the family, to organize, to plan, to be able to spend time on your hobbies. Understanding and actually stepping into that position of a traditional wife actually let me step into my femininity and being okay with being a female and being okay with my feminine side, because really modern working women are constantly trying to be men. They're constantly trying to compete with men for this sense of equality, which really doesn't make any sense when you think about it, because men and women are so different, and that is okay. We as women just need to learn that that is okay. Stepping into your feminine side is okay. Being a mother is okay. Looking after your household and your husband is okay. And I started to understand that men love a wife who will let them lead. Men love a wife who wants to look nice for them. They love to come home from a hard day at work and walk inside and see a beautifully home-cooked meal on the table. They like a woman who shaves their armpits and doesn't have blue hair and isn't constantly trying to compete with them. Because men thrive off financially providing for their family and working to be the sole provider for their family. I had to learn that that's okay that men want these things, because it's not societal expectations that has made them believe this, but it is actually just simply how they're wired and how most men think. And relationships work when you are both thriving individually, not in competition with each other, and actually work together with your differences. And life has become so much more peaceful. It's been so much more refreshing since becoming more traditional. And my family and my husband actually isn't a burden anymore when you put them first, because I don't have anything else that's taking up my mind and taking up my space within the day. I actually have time to clean my house. I have time to spend with my daughter and to raise my daughter and to teach my daughter new things. I have time to spend with my husband. I have time to cook nice meals for my family, which I love to do. I have time for my passions, which is what I'm doing right now on YouTube. I've learned not to see this as a career, but see this as a hobby, something that I'm passionate about, something that does not come first. My family always comes first. And I've had to learn this. It's like rewiring my brain to put my family first and to understand that YouTube and social media and everything else is a second priority. And that's why I'm not putting any time to when I post my videos, because sometimes I don't have time because things in my family come up, other things are more priority over YouTube and social media. But society has lied to women. It was all a lie. Being a modern working woman actually made me angry and resentful to men and to my family and to my husband and to society. It put me in a victimized mindset. And it made me believe that being a traditional woman was the side effect of the oppressive patriarchy. That the best thing for women to do is to get a job, to climb the corporate ladder, don't have children, and constantly be in competition with men. But when you really think about it, feminism is really only benefiting the government. Because now they don't just have one person in the household who's paying taxes, they have two. And the children are no longer being taught by the mother, but by government-regulated institutions. So you have disconnect within the family. Being traditional is so looked down upon within society, but that's only because being traditional actually works. But it really makes me sad that women see being a working modern woman as the only option. Because statistically, if you look at the statistics and you look at society, it only makes women lonely. It makes them angry. It makes them resentful. It makes them miserable. And it makes them burnt out, because women weren't created to take on this load of work and leadership. And I've mentioned this study before, but this one specific study suggests that married women who have children, who have a partner who earns more, they had the highest levels of happiness in life compared to other women. And women would thrive so much more if they just understood that being a mother benefits you. Having a partner that you can rely on benefits you. Being traditional benefits you. So my life has completely turned around, completely flipped. And honestly, I am so much happier. I am now taking responsibility for my life and for my actions. I'm no longer sitting in this victim mindset, and understanding that being traditional, loving my husband, loving my children, taking care of my household is actually a blessing and is no longer a burden to me anymore, which is just a breath of fresh air, honestly. But I'm going to end this video here because I feel like it's probably gone for way too long. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below what you thought of my story, or if you have a story very similar. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you guys know every single time I post. I actually created a video comparing career-focused women to more traditional women. So go check that video out if you haven't already, because I feel like that will kind of help you understand where I'm coming from and my ideas. You can also find me on social media as well. You can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Getter, you can find me on Twitter, And this video is also streaming on Rumble. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye. Mwah.